Okay. Pay attention to Microsoft roadmap item number MC11883300. AI agents, they're getting their own identities in Entra ID. That means they're getting their own email addresses, their own team accounts, their own org chart placement. And it's so easy to treat this as standard product news. It's a cool feature, but let's move on. And that would be a catastrophically wrong decision. See, forget about building better agents. This is about controlling the infrastructure that the agents depend on. And I think it's brilliant because it works whether you're using a Microsoft agent or you're using someone else's agent. And this is the real story. Microsoft understood something that OpenAI, Anthropic, they still don't actually understand. It's not that the model quality determines adoption in enterprise, but it's the unsexy stuff. It's the governance, it's the compliance, it's the ability to control audit, control and prove that your agents are operating inside your control plane properly. Microsoft is betting that the entire agent category is going to operate on that principle. And I think they're right. I'm Blake, and I've spent the last 10 years in tech advising companies on their data and AI strategy. I'm here to break down for you the most interesting moves that all the players in AI are making. All the products, the moats, the distribution tactics, everything is curated so that you can stay informed. Today, we're going to be diving into Microsoft ID play. See, an agent with an email address and an org chart is no longer software. It's basically infrastructure. Microsoft is getting the first mover advantage in that regard. And let me be very specific about what's happening because the mechanism in this case, it really matters. The moment a company makes agents organizational identities, they're embedding them into the permissioning and the government's infrastructure that the enterprises are already depending on. See, at that point, they're not optional. They're not temporary. They're actually official. Now, think about the implications operationally. Your compliance team now has to audit agents the same way that they audit humans. Your security team has to manage agent permissions through the same identity and access management infrastructure. And then your CISO, he has to account for all the agent activity in the exact same audit trails. Every governance rule that applies to employees now applies to the same agents. And this is the key part. Enterprises have to use the infrastructure. They can't opt out of it. HIPAA requires it, SOX complies it, GDPR requires it. The second agents become authenticated organizational members, they're going to fall under the same regulatory framework as humans. Now, Microsoft is making sure that that infrastructure is their infrastructure. Every competing agent company has just become a software vendor running on that infrastructure stack. And right now, I just don't think they know it yet. Now, here's my take on what this means for everyone building agents. OpenAI, they can build a better model. Anthropic can build smarter reasoning, for example, and even Salesforce can build vertical agents. But none of them can provide what Microsoft just did. They can't provide compliance and governance at the infrastructure layer because they don't actually own the enterprise identity layer. So, you know what happens when you try and run a competing agent in an enterprise? You have two problems. One, you have to convince your team to use the agent instead of Microsoft's. And then two, you have to actually help them figure out the governance. See, most enterprises, they're going to choose the option where the governance is already built in. The place where all the audit trails are native, where the permissions are managed through existing infrastructure. And that's why Entra ID is the integration, and that's the real play that actually works. It already powers 300 million users. The second agents become first-class citizens in Entra, they're not separate infrastructure anymore. They're native. They're part of the organization. Now, my take is that it doesn't just kill competing agents. It means that competing agents also have to run through the infrastructure to be enterprise viable, which means that Microsoft's getting the relationship with the enterprise regardless of whose model is doing the thinking. That's the standard picks and shovels play, and it's genius. The real AI lock-in I see is not technical anymore. It's how your CFO is going to budget for agents, and Microsoft just changed that forever. And there's something now that no one is talking about that I think is the real vulnerability for the competitors. Agent 365 pricing has not been announced yet, but everyone knows it's coming, and it's going to be a per agent license. Separate headcount, separate budget line. And that matters beyond just the pricing itself. Because when you budget as an agent, as an employee, the psychology of that purchase also changes. It's staffing, it's headcount planning, it's a conversation with your CFO about headcount ratio or headcount to revenue ratio. And that conversation is so much easier when you have an agent that is licensed through the same HR system of where you're tracking the humans. So when it shows up on the payroll dashboards, when it's built into the workforce planning systems, it's so much easier to understand. The competing agents, they can't participate in those conversations. They're not organizational members. They don't have their own ID, their own email address, their own Teams account. They're all external tools at that point. And external tools, well, they don't get budgets. Organizational members get budgets because they're assumed to be permanent. And that's an unseen moat. It's not technical in that way. It's psychological. It's about how enterprises budget and plan. So the agent wars have already really ended. And the winner actually wasn't decided by better AI. It was decided by org chart access of all things. My opinion is that this move is worth way more strategically than Copilot ever was. Copilot changed how enterprises think about AI assistance. This is changing how enterprises architect their entire workforces. Now, there are three paths that the competitors can take that can combat Microsoft roadmap item MC11883300 Agent ID. All three are losing. What can competitors actually do here? Well, option one is that they build their own governance infrastructure. But that's going to cost billions. It's going to take years. It's going to require hiring security, compliance, identity teams. And by the time they finish, Microsoft's going to already have that embedded in every enterprise that couldn't wait for that. Option two is that they partner with Microsoft and they run the agents through Entra ID, which means you basically accept that Microsoft owns the relationship with the enterprise. Then you become a model provider on top of it. And then option three is going vertical, building the agent so specific that an industry governance layer becomes secondary to the outcomes it provides. Now, this may work for companies like Salesforce, and it might work for a few others, but it can't scale horizontally. It can't scale across all the enterprises. And all these paths, they're pretty much losing paths compared to being able to be the Microsoft of agents, which means that all the talent, all the capital, and the effort is going to go into competing agents that are mostly wasted. Every tech monopoly was built the same way. And it's being applied to a game that Microsoft's basically already won by changing the rules. Infrastructure companies win by making themselves the mandatory compliance and enterprise governance layer, and not, funnily enough, by being the best. They win by being mandatory. Google made browsers mandatory. Microsoft made Windows mandatory. Amazon made cloud mandatory. Salesforce made CRM mandatory. Now, Microsoft is actually doing the same thing, making identity mandatory for agents. And the pattern is always the same. You take an emerging technology, you embed it into a foundational layer that enterprises depend on, and then you make that layer governance native. And you don't have to compete anymore, basically. You've changed the rules of how the game operates. So if you're planning to use agents in your organization, you've kind of already made your choice. You just don't really know it yet. Microsoft's move with the Agentic users is the clearest signal that I've seen that the infrastructure wars are not decided by innovation alone, but also by governance and architecture. The company that controls enterprise identity is going to control the enterprise adoption, not by being the company with the best model. The choice isn't between agents, it's between who controls your governance and infrastructure. Everything else is going to cascade from that. Microsoft understood that. Everyone else is still focused on model quality. And that's why they've won before the war even started. I'm Blake. Hopefully this was interesting. See you in the next one.